Hello everybody! JGC Anime here today. We're to review Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. So without further ado, let's just hop right into this. So what is the story of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2? Basically it starts off with a prequel storyline where we follow Gojo trying to deliver a girl to help with some kind of ritual thing, and then after that we follow the actual storyline of this season, which is about a bunch of curses going to Shibuya and causing a bunch of massive havoc, which is supposed to be like the big dramatic thing that's supposed to happen this season. And yeah, that's not really a story summary, but it does describe what happens this season, so we're just gonna roll with it. So, in terms of spoiler-free thoughts for this season of Jujutsu Kaisen, I'm a bit mixed in a lot of ways, because I've seen plenty of people hype up Season 2, say it's one of the best things of all anime, it's so freaking good, and after watching it, I felt like I was going to go into this probably enjoying a good chunk of it, and that is how I actually feel. I do think it has a lot of things that make it better than Season 1 and the movie. However, at the same time, there's a lot of things in there that make it a bit weaker than the other things as well. I'll go over most of those in the spoiler section, but for what I can say without spoiling anything, there are definitely times where stuff felt dragged out, or things definitely could have taken a bit more of a interesting approach to how it does things. There are literally times where they'll just shove text onto a screen and be like, yep, that's gonna explain things, which I can dive into more of that in the spoiler section. But basically there are multiple amounts of things that just kind of feel like they're dragged out or struggle to really be super interesting. However, I will say that's mostly only the case for the first half. Like after the Gojo stuff at the beginning, which is actually pretty solid overall, we then begin the actual Shibuya arc stuff, and the way it starts isn't the strongest in my opinion, but then once some later stuff happens, it gets so much better and it just blows by so quickly. Like I blew through the rest of the season after that. And yeah, moving on to another thing, I would like to also discuss something that very much surprised me with this season, and that is the opening themes. Not just the fact that I think the second opening theme, Specials, is definitely my favorite JJK opening so far, but also how they were placed. Like usually when you're watching a 24 to 23 episode anime, usually they place two different openings, one at like 11 to 12 episodes and the other for the other half, you know, the 12 to or 13 to 24 or 23, whatever. And I was surprised to find that the opening for this season, like the first opening, only played for like the first 5 or so episodes, if that. Like it was very short with how much they used the opening, and it really surprised me because that opening was really well done, well animated and everything, and it was super good. So it very much surprised me how little they ended up using it during this season. I guess it is mostly just due to the fact that, you know, it doesn't really fit the arc that we're about to go into after the prequel, not really prequel, but like the pre-story arc that takes place in the past. It doesn't really work with the current storyline, the Shibuya arc stuff, but it was kind of surprising to see that. I was not expecting the opening to change that quickly. I thought it was going to go for at least 11 or so episodes, but nope, didn't even go that long. But moving past that, I do think the Shibuya arc as a whole, not really judging the Gojo past stuff, since overall it was just pretty solid. Not the best storytelling ever, but I did like a lot of it, and I thought it was very interesting and introduced a lot of really good characters. But focusing on the Shibuya arcs, that is where most of the season dedicates itself. I do think that there are a lot of really strong points here. I love how much it develops Itadori's character. I love how it changes the entire story for season 3, and I'm very interested in seeing where things progress after that, since it did a great job just drawing me into what the story was about. And while, as I said, there are times where it would feel a bit dragged out, it was still very enjoyable overall, and I do think that it did a lot to help develop characters, as well as give some very interesting choices that I did not expect this show to go towards, as well as some things that would have really surprised me had I not been spoiled to them, because newsflash, when a show is super popular, it's kind of hard to avoid spoilers. So there are some things here that I did get spoiled on, but I'm glad that despite the fact I got spoiled on them, they didn't actually ruin the viewing experience for me that much. And I still think there are so many other positives I can give this show, but it's really hard to dive into them without spoilers. So yep, going on to one more thing I guess I could talk about without spoiling anything, and that is the narration in this season. Like, I don't remember how much narration was in the first season, but there is a lot of narration in this season. Not like a super massive chunk like every single episode, but there are times where the narrator kind of ruins some of the moments in here. Like there are times where I'm watching the show and I can already kind of picture what's going on, but then the narrator has to go on for like a solid minute just explaining what's happening. I just sit there like, yeah, I know. I was able to figure this out. And there are also times where the narrator will explain things that I feel like could have easily been explained by the characters themselves that I think just really makes me lose interest for a second. And I know it sounds dumb to say, but I definitely feel like had the narrator not been the one saying that stuff, had it been the actual people saying it, like the people who are doing those things, I feel like maybe they would have been better. Just the narrator ruined it a little bit for me, and I would have preferred just the character saying stuff. But yeah, that's all I can really say without spoiling anything, so we're just going into the spoiler section now. Here's the timestamps for the spoilers, and if you have seen the show, I recommend sticking around and hear my thoughts, but if you haven't, just get to the end to get any spoilers. But again, if you have seen it, I recommend sticking around and hear my thoughts. So yeah, I'm going to count down for 5, and I'm going to enter the spoiler section. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so talking about the Gojo prequel-esque stuff, I'm just gonna keep calling it the prequel stuff. I actually think there's a lot of good elements to it. The only sad part is it was one of the many spoilers I got this season about how Riko, the girl that Gojo was supposed to protect along with Geto, I was spoiled about how she dies at the end of it all. And I feel like if I wasn't spoiled about that, that definitely would have made more of an impact. But there were still some very fun things about her character and how I do wish she got the chance to live. And it was very sad to see her not get the chance to enjoy her life. It was a very sad moment, but still, it didn't hit as hard as I think it would have if I wasn't spoiled on it. But even so, everything after that point I wasn't spoiled on, so getting to see Geto slowly kind of go to the mindset he has in Jujutsu Kaisen 0 was actually super freaking interesting, and I love that part. It was very enjoyable. And I'm also really glad that the season finally explained some things I was confused about with Geto, like why was he working with the curses and why was he doing this and that? It just didn't make sense. But now, after having watched the season, I am finally able to kind of get an idea of what's going on in his head, at least to the extent of I actually understand why he's doing all this. At least before the end, where at the end of it, he's just like, yeah, no, I'm just trying to create a bunch of chaos and stuff like that, which got a bit confusing. But it made sense at the start because it was revealed that Geto actually did die in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, and the reason that his body was able to move around was because a curse of sorts or something actually was like this, it was like this brain thing took control of his body, and that was actually really freaking interesting, and I love how that kind of distorted his original plan of making a world of only Jujutsu sorcerers. I think that the way they just kind of twisted it around to make it seem like now he was just going for a world of only curses, and the way he kind of twisted his words around was very interesting. And the fact that Gojo got to pop off at the start of the whole Shibuya incident was also really freaking good. And overall, I definitely think that Geto's whole story is far more interesting than I originally gave it credit for, and I'm very curious to see exactly where stuff might go down the line with him. And yeah, but moving past that, we're gonna talk about the main Shibuya arc and how I felt about the beginning, middle, and end of it all. Since if I were to describe it in short words, it's that the beginning was fine enough, the middle was kind of dragged out a bit, but still decently solid, and the end was mostly good until the actual very end. Like, the last episode to me really was not satisfying. I thought it was one of the worst episodes of the season. Not worst in the sense of like, oh, it was so bad, but in the sense of worst as in it just didn't leave me excited for the next season as much as it could have been, because I feel like there definitely was something there that could have made it a lot better, but we're gonna talk about that later. But yeah, talking about the Shibuya arc, I want to first start with the beginning, where Gojo, before he's sealed away by the curses, just pops off this season. He does such an amazing job showing off how freaking OP he is. And the fact that he was able to take out Hanami was really freaking great. I really enjoyed that stuff. And seeing him just get sealed away was really interesting as well, because it's just like, even after he's sealed away, he still tries to break out, and he seems like he's able to maybe potentially do it in the future, maybe, I don't know. But he definitely is quite a difficult person to keep caged in, and I'm very curious to see where that goes in the next season, since at the end of this one, he's still sealed. So I'm very interested in seeing how that plays out. But yeah, moving past that, next we get to what I consider to be the weirdest part of the arc, which is kind of everything after Gojo is sealed, leading up to the addition of Sukuna, who I will say right now is the best part of the season. But before that, everything leading up to that point is fine. I definitely feel like there are some fights that are really dragged out, like the whole fight between Itadori and the weird grasshopper thing. I just wasn't a super big fan about how it all played out. I felt like it definitely could have been finished a lot faster. It felt like they were really pushing it out, trying to stretch these out as far as they can. And while there are some good moments in there, but I just wasn't a big fan of that fight. But moving on, there were some pretty great things in there, such as the return of Toji, Fushiguro's father, who got killed off by Gojo during the prequel stuff. However, when it came to the end of his story, I was a bit mixed on how it all played out in the end. There were some really good fights in there as well, such as Toji strategy against the octopus monster known as Dagon. I definitely think there's some interesting parts, but I still think that overall that whole scene of Toji's return only to, kill himself after learning that Fushiguro is actually living a pretty decent life, not taking up the name that he didn't want him to, and stuff like that. That whole scene was definitely one of the better parts of this whole storyline, but I just wasn't super big on how long it was taking to really get to something super freaking interesting. And because of all that, it made me wonder whether I was actually going to enjoy this arc as much as other people were, because it was kind of starting to fall into that territory of just feeling very dragged out. The fight scenes were just taking forever to just move things along. They were trying to make sure that it took a long time to get things done. But then we get to the good stuff. Then we get to the return of Sukuna, who, after getting fed more fingers, now having 15 fingers inside of him, ends up just absolutely massacring everything and just absolutely kills it with being one of the best, most hateable villains in the sense of, like, you understand he's bad, but dang, do you have fun watching him being bad. Like, it is so much fun, and I definitely think that the Sukuna story stuff that happened, like, for 4 episodes or so was by far the best part of this season. I loved Sukuna being in the spotlight, especially with how after he goes off killing, like, I think maybe like 1,000 or so people, then he just lets Itadori have his body back, and after that you just see Itadori break down, just demanding to die, just wanting to die because he wants to get rid of Sukuna, and it's just so good. I love how much it gives Itadori emotional turmoil and giving him the chance to grow as a person. It is such a nice piece of story, and I definitely think it helps Itadori grow a lot, especially with how right after that, he just goes down to the subways, places to go try and help, and then the first thing he sees is Mahito there, standing in front of Nanami, and then he just makes Nanami explode and makes his bottom half just fall to the ground and stuff, and it was just so good. Even if it was spoiled for me, I actually kind of teared up at Nanami dying. Even though I wasn't super invested in him as much as other people were, I did like him as a character, so seeing him die was a truly sad moment, though it didn't affect me as another death later down the line. But before we actually dive into that, I want to talk a bit more about Sukuna and how he just shocked me with showing how evil he could truly be when, right after he was revived, literally 2 girls who were with Geto who were saying how they were gonna make the fake Geto regret everything, only to, get instantly massacred by Sukuna, who's just like, I ain't taking orders from nobody. Although he does kind of make a little bet thing with Jogo, who he literally says, hey, if you can land 1 hit on me, I'll work under you for the time being. And after that, you just see Jogo just being like, well, frick, I guess I gotta try this. And their fight is also really freaking good. Just Sukuna super just massively pops off in this, especially with how he defeats Jogo, which makes us now down to almost everybody. Almost everybody's gone now, and all that really lies is Mahito and Geto. And then after that, more stuff happens, and then Sukuna leaves Itadori. And after that, I am shocked at how in just a few episodes, I went from just thinking that JJK Season 2 was just another season of JJK to absolutely freaking loving it. I loved how it was doing everything, and I really enjoyed the overall story and the vibe it gave. I super freaking loved it, and it was so good. And I was very curious to see how they would wrap things up, since after that, we also get the death of Nobara, whose death, like the rest, was spoiled for me. However, I'm not sure if they really say she's dead, because they say that, oh yeah, I played some healing stuff, so she might be able to make it, which I am very skeptical of that. I highly doubt it, in fact. But even so, it's interesting since we had that whole episode just dedicated to Nobara's death, and we see how she had this promise and other stuff. It was really sad, and it actually, I think it got me more watery-eyed than Nanami's death. Like, it was really freaking sad, which is just as strange, because just like Nanami, I didn't care much for Nobara as much as other people might have. So seeing me actually want to almost cry seeing her die, it really amazes me with how JJK managed to pull that off. And it really affected Itadori, since right after that, he's fine with getting beat up as he just breaks down crying. And the only one who's able to bring him out of it is Todo, the man, the myth, the legend, the lover of the idol girl person. Like, Todo, he was amazing. Todo definitely was, to me, is the second best part behind Sukuna. Like, he was so freaking good. The way he was able to pump Yuichi Itadori back up, get him back on his feet, and then they just work together to try to take down Mahito. It was so good. And then after that, you had the whole thing where then Itadori confronts Mahito. It's just like, yeah, I am you. Like, because Mahito was saying they were the same, and it was just so interesting, especially with how they had the metaphor with how Mahito was like the bunny being hunted by the wolf, and Itadori was the wolf, and it was so freaking good. It was so good. I loved it. It was so amazing, and I was just so super into it. I loved it. And then after that, you have the whole big final fight where Geto shows up and eats Mahito for some reason. I still don't fully understand why. I guess he just really wanted to maybe have Mahito's powers or something. I think that's what happened. But anyways, you know, he eats him and stuff like that. So I guess that means the entire curse group is now gone. It's just Geto now, who still has Gojo sealed away. And then after that, you have this big moment where this other lady who was talking with Sukuna showed up, and a bunch of other stuff's happening. One of the other curses who showed up saw Itadori as his brother, and because of that, he was now fighting to work alongside Itadori, and it was just getting so hype. It was getting so good. I was excited to see where things would lead. And then the final episode happens, where after another person comes in named Tsukumo, who was just kind of shown off in the prequel stuff and then has now reappeared for the last little bit of this, and it's super interesting to see where things are gonna go. And then after we reach the final episode, the rest of it just kinda is a bit weird, because now that all of the cursed spirits and stuff have all been slain, it's basically just been one massive massacre of people and cursed spirits and stuff like that. After all of that, then the fake Geto leaves after setting up a plan he had in place involving cursed users and cursed spirits and stuff like that. And now it's just gonna be like one big brawl. And that was somewhat interesting, as we then kind of cut through a bunch of different stuff before finally seeing our boy Yuta, who has just made his reappearance. And it was actually kind of interesting seeing, especially how after he saves a kid from a cursed spirit, then claims that he is going to go kill Yuji Itadori. Stuff like that was really interesting. And then after that, we get what I consider to be one of the most disappointing things I've ever seen Jujutsu Kaisen do. And that is at the very end of the episode, right after all this crazy stuff has happened and just everything feels like it's just too bizarre to think of it the same way like we did at the beginning of the season. Now they decide, all right, we've had all of these things happen. Now, what happens after that? Should we, A, actually make another episode to explain all this stuff and make it all seem pretty massive, so that way when the next season starts, we can have a lot of interesting stuff? Or B, do a slideshow of random pictures on the screen with text. If you can judge by the fact of how upset I am at the ending, you can guess which one they chose. And yeah, I absolutely hate how the final episode ended. I feel like if we had just one more episode explaining all this stuff through actual conversation and stuff like that to really build up the drama of what's to come, it would have been a lot better than just slapping text on a screen and being like, yeah, that'll work, that'll do. And it just makes it feel so frustrating, which I'm probably just the only one who feels this way, but I just don't like that. I found that the whole choice to just slap text on a screen and be like, yep, that's just how this is gonna end, really upsets me, because what that text says is so massive. Like, Itadori is now on the run, and Gojo is now considered an enemy because he was sealed away, and they claim he's like a co-conspirator and stuff like that. And also, Masamichi has been sentenced to death because of, you know, his association with Gojo and stuff like that. And the fact that now Yuta is out there searching for Itadori, like, these are all massive twists, just such crazy things that are happening. So many dramatic things that are so cool and so freaking awesome, and they decide to throw it all in a PowerPoint presentation. I understand that probably for the sake of the story it was necessary, or maybe it just wasn't really possible with the episode count they had, but dang, do I wish there was just one more episode. Even if it was just talking the entire episode, just one more episode to just give us all this in actual, like, show format. It just goes against the whole idea of show, not tell. It just really just tells everything, and I feel like it could have just been so much better if they just showed it. Just give us a bit more time to show it, since there are so many exciting and hype moments in this season that I absolutely freaking love. And yet that last little bit just pissed me off so much. It got me so upset, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, just, I'm upset with it, but as long as it gives us a good third season, I'm fine with that. And yeah, moving past that now, one more thing I guess I want to kind of talk about is something that confused me a little bit, and that is the whole thing involving Yuta as a character, where at the end of the season, after he's about to be attacked by a cursed spirit, the cursed spirit he thought he took down but failed to, then the cursed spirit tries to attack him, and then after that he tells Rika to not overdo it. And that leaves me a bit confused, because like, I thought Rika was like she moved on, like Rika had passed on. So does that mean Rika stayed with him after all? Is Rika still there? That confuses me. Like, does that mean Rika never actually left? Or is what is it, like the spirit of Rika is still there as the cursed spirit, stuff like that? I don't understand what is going on with Rika and stuff. It very much confused me, but it is what it is. Overall, I definitely think that the ending of JJK Season 2 was definitely one of the weakest parts, but overall, it was still a pretty solid season and I did enjoy it. Would I say it's better than Season 1? Maybe by a little bit. I wouldn't say it was the best thing ever, but I really enjoyed it and I definitely think it was a bit better than Season 1. And yeah, overall, I very much enjoyed it and I'm excited to see what happens in Season 3. So yeah, that's all I really have to say. So we're at the conclusion of this video. What are my final thoughts? Overall, JJK Season 2 is pretty solid. It's not perfect, of course, but it's still very enjoyable. I like a lot of things about it, and I definitely think it's better than Season 1 by a little bit. Not a massive bit, but enough that I can give it respect and say, yep, I enjoyed myself quite a lot. And there's just so many fun things here to enjoy, and I definitely think that JJK Season 2 was enjoyable to watch, and that's why I give Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 an 8 out of 10. Pretty solid overall, and I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in Season 3. So yeah, that's all I really have to say, and thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe. I also do anime fans to the channel, and I will see you all around. Peace!